If you don't have real answers to this, the good news is these are the two questions to go looking for answers to in your life. This is your vision quest, is to find the answers to these by reading, by experiencing, by meditating, by spending time by yourself, by praying, by asking people's advice, by therapy. I don't know. Do your thing.
So the third macronutrient is sense of purpose.
Meaning.
Yeah, and obviously it extends far beyond quote unquote work.
Yeah, for sure. So meaning is the most important because it's the protein. You'll die.
Right. You can vary carbs and fat a lot. You can't mess with protein too much.
You can't mess with protein. It's a basic building block, and you're in big, big trouble when you become protein deprived because there's no other way to get it. It's not like your carbs are going to transform into proteins. And everybody knows when they don't have a sense of meaning because their life is empty. They're the most miserable when they don't have a sense of meaning. But nobody knows exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. It's like, I need this thing, but I don't know what it is. So philosophers and psychologists, by the way, define meaning as actually a combination of three things: coherence, purpose, and significance. Coherence is things happen for a reason. That's the first part of meaning. I believe that things happen for a particular reason. That doesn't mean my way is the right way. And it might be randomness. My father was a Ph.D. biostatistician, also very religious. And he used to say that the greatest miracle in the world was randomness, that God built the universe with randomness and regular distributions of events. It's such an extraordinary thing. He thought that miracles were events on extreme tail events in random distributions, and God loved randomness. In other words, there's lots and lots of different ways to understand the coherence part, why things are coherent. The second is purpose, which is direction. Your life has direction. There's a word in you're not a sailor, are you? I can't. There's a word called the rum line, RHUM line. It's actually a much more common word in Spanish, el rumbo, and it's actually part of common parlance. Rumbo means the end point toward which your voyage is tending.
Yep.
You're not going to get there, and you're going to vary from it, but you have to have
a North
direction.
Star. You have to have something you're navigating to.
You have to have something, right? Navigationally. And the last is significance. It would matter if I weren't alive. It would matter if I'm not here. So these are the component parts. Now, these are worth thinking about in detail in our lives. But here's the way I have a kind of a diagnostic test to see if somebody has a meaning crisis. It's a 2-question exam. If somebody doesn't have real answers, everybody's got PC answers, answers you'd give your mom or whatever. But if you don't have real answers to this, the good news is these are the 2 questions to go looking for answers to in your life. This is your vision quest, is to find the answers to these by reading, by experiencing, by meditating, by spending time by yourself, by praying, by asking people's advice, by therapy. I don't know. Do your thing, right? Question number 1 is, why are you alive? Why are you alive? You got to have an answer. It's not my answer, your answer, a real answer. Question number 2 is, for what are you willing to die today? You flunk this quiz by saying, I don't know. That's how you flunk the quiz. But then the adventure actually begins after you flunk the quiz, because I'm going to figure that out. I'm going to go find those answers. I'm going to read. I'm going to consider. I'm going to do all the things that you do metacognitively to find the answer to these questions.
But let's think about that for a second. There are probably a lot of people who cannot answer 1, who can answer 2.
Or who can answer 1 but can't answer 2. I'm alive because, some biological process, et cetera, but number 2 is, I don't know what I'm willing to die for.
Let's clarify that, right? So are you asking 1 through the lens of biology?
Depends on how you answer it and what actually gives you meaning. So the way to answer the first question, why are you alive, is either...
Because a spiritual person or a religious person would have a divine response to the first question. An atheist would respond to the first question in terms of biology.
And they would really understand. And that would give them and that biological answer could give you a tremendous sense of meaning and a sense of place in the universe.
Although it's interesting because as someone who leans far more towards the agnostic atheist side, I spend most of my time coming to grips with mortality, which is a very difficult thing to come to grips with.
Which is the second question, right?
But I come to grips with that by addressing your third point around sense of purpose, which is my insignificance. So in other words, it's only through accepting my complete and utter insignificance that I can have some semblance of peace with my finitude and my eventual and relatively quick demise.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons that transcendence is a basic element is one of the happiness practices. The practice of transcendence, whether it's secular or religious transcendence, it's really important because it makes you small. It makes you small. You stand in awe of a sunset. You stand in awe of seeing somebody committing an unbelievably selfless act. It makes you actually feel smaller, which gives you peace through a sense of perspective. That's a very common phenomenon. And one of the people who works in my area, Dacher Keltner at UC Berkeley, he has a book called Awe, AWE, that talks about the neurocognitive processes involved when you're experiencing awe and why it gives you such deep peace. And it's really all about what you're talking about. You got to get small, like Steve Martin used to say in the 70s, get small. And if you can find ways to get small, you're going to be a lot better off, for sure, is the whole thing.
But how do we reconcile that with the need to have significance through your sense of purpose?
Well, the key is, at the same time, you realize that you matter, but at the same time, it's okay that the universe will be just fine if you die. And they seem like conflicting phenomena, but they're actually, I think that they're weirdly compatible. These ideas, this balance between the two. It matters that I exist here, and things will be just fine if I don't. You think about this with a lot of people, when you get married for the first time, you say, you love me. And if I'm gone, you'll be okay. It's this sense of peace with that balance between those two things turns out to be the trick.
I've never been able to find that.
Yeah. Well,
I can't.
I guess practice makes perfect. I haven't found it either, for sure. But the way to think about this and the way to find the answers to the questions is really interesting. And I've worked on this with my kids. I have adult kids. My kids are a little older than yours. And my 23-year-old, he's a piece of work, man. His name is Carlos. And he likes you. And he's human performance machine. He's a scout sniper in the U.S. Marine Corps. He's 204, 4% body fat, 6'5". He's all about it. He needs the information that you're providing, obviously. So, he didn't have the answers to that because many adolescents don't and young adults don't. But he found the answers to that as he did something that was truly difficult, going through Marine basic training and then the, infantry training battalion and then doing the NDOC as he's an operator in the Marines now in the Scout Sniper Platoon. Stuff's no joke. It's hard. And you ask him the question now, why are you alive? He would simply say, because God made me to serve. And that is both the how and the why of the first question. And the second question, for what are you willing to die? Very simple.
Sure.
For my faith, for my family, for my fellow Marines, and for the United States of America, and for our allies. These are very solid answers. These are not the right answers for somebody listening, or you, or me necessarily, but they are answers that he actually believes, and that's what gives him his sense of meaning, is the content of those two answers, and finding what we really do think about those things. What really is persuasive to us is a journey, really a philosophical and for some a theological journey really worth taking.
It's definitely something I've spent much more time thinking about in the past year than certainly any time before.
People typically do around age 50.
Yeah.
People typically do. In ancient Vedic physics, there's the theory of the 4 quarters of life.
Mm-hmm.
We think about, adult and kid and adult and all that. And, last time we talked, we were talking about From Strength to Strength, which was my last book, which is a lot about that. But and according to this ancient Hindu thinking, you've got brahmacharya, which is your student phase, the first quarter of your life. The second quarter of your life is called grihastha, which is the householder phase, where you're hustling and you're starting your family and your work. The third quarter, going in from the second to the third, is the second adolescence into something called vanaprastha, which means these 2 Sanskrit words, to retire into the forest. And it's supposed to happen around age 50. And what happens is that certain things fade and other things become more salient to you. More transcendental things start to become more important to you. And part of this has to do with the change in your brain, change in your strengths, the change in your crystallized intelligence. These are real phenomena that neuroscientists have identified, and social psychologists as well. But as a spiritual matter, it means, what is my retirement into the forest? What does that actually mean? It means I need to, certain things are more important to me than they used to be. These are important questions, not because I'm going to die, but because I just want to know, what does this actually mean about, and a lot of people wind up coming back to the faith of their youth when this happens. A lot of people will develop a meditation practice. Some people will find that they will get deeply, deeply into fitness in ways they hadn't before and doing things that are super hard for them, that challenge them as human beings. Some people will change careers, do something that they've always wanted to do, but something that has more artistic significance more creative significance than it had before. But all of that is this vanaprastha. And the whole point of that is to get to the fourth quarter, which is called sannyasa. And that's enlightenment, to sit at the feet of the guru and to bask in the glow of the master is kind of how the Hindus will talk about it. But you got to do the work to get there. You got to ask the questions and be on the quest. And that's your third quarter, around age 50.
And do you think that each of these quarters, which I recall from our first discussion, don't necessarily reflect equal chunks of time on the calendar, but do you think that they require an emphasis on different elements of those three macronutrients of happiness?
I do. And again, this is mixing, neuroscience plus social psychology plus Vedic wisdom. And this is like where no man has gone before. But I do, and I've actually asked this to some teachers that I haven't. I go to India every year, and I study with various gurus and spiritual teachers, which is outside my tradition. I'm a Catholic, but it makes me a better Catholic, and it makes me a better social scientist too, quite frankly. And I have a teacher in Palakkad, which is in southern India, a guy named Nochur Venkataraman, a Tamil guy. And I was asking him about, precisely these sets of questions. And he said that people pass through these phases, depending on how adroit they are spiritually at different times and different periods of time. But you have to do all the learning from each one. You need to be a student. You need to develop your life. Then you need to retire into the forest and contemplate these questions such that you can get to the ultimate destination, which is this period of enlightenment in your life. And in so doing, you need to develop these different parts of your life. You can't do this without the love that you share with other people, which is inherently enjoyable. You can't do this without achieving certain things and understanding that your life requires a certain amount of satisfaction, and that has achievement, that has earned success involved in it. And of course, you can't do that without understanding what meaning is to you and what the meaning of your life really is.